All right, so our first conversation now is Nigeria marks Children's Day 2025. The conversation around childcare extends beyond celebrations to its critical role in shaping the nation's economic future. With over 31 million children under 5 and only 10% in licensed care centers, Nigeria's childcare crisis is not just a social issue, it's an economic imperative. The recent SAL commitments by West African governments, including Nigeria, highlights childcare as a cornerstone of human capital development, gender equality, and GDP growth. Meanwhile, initiatives like the relaunched National Homegrown School Feeding Program, they aim to combat malnutrition while boosting rural economies. Yet challenges, persist, like underfunding, workforce shortages, and systemic barriers, keeping millions of women out of the labor force, costing Nigeria billions in lost productivity. Well, joining us to discuss all of this, we have Ola Oladelesi, the founder the Money With Club. Join me via Zoom. Great to have you on the show, Ola.
Thank you for having me, Laddie.
So
happy Children's Day.
Yeah, happy Children's Day. Yeah, wish I had some candy here to really celebrate, but I guess we'll get that later. But we see the average parent is dealing with a lot right now, even though some things have kind of stabilized in the economy. That's looking at the macro side of things. You're dealing with inflation, you're dealing with high energy costs, you're dealing with band A costs, and a lot, food, all of that. And now you have to pay really expensive school fees. So it's getting really expensive to do a lot of things. And I guess childcare is one of that.
Yes, yes. I mean, everything that has happened in the economy, and I dare say the global economy, has impacted the ability of parents to take care of their children to the extent that they would want to. And so we have found that in some cases, children have to be to go to school without enough food or without food at all, or have to downgrade on the quality of school they would otherwise have been going to, or even things like the level of care or entertainment or enjoyment, for lack of a better word, that parents would have been able to afford their kids. The economy has impacted parents, and that's on one side. The other side also is the fact that women are fundamentally kept on hold when the children are a certain age, a lot of times, and that also impacts the economy. It's also a cost to the family's finances.
Right, and talking about women, at this point, and the whole conversation is about gender equality and supporting, all genders at this point. Definitely, getting a daycare or trying to keep your child as a woman while you're at work is that's also becoming quite expensive at this point, which is not allowing women to participate as they would like to in the workforce. So, what would you say is the short-term solution, for that, from a policy direction? What do you think can happen there?
From a policy direction, we can take a cue from other more advanced societies where when kids are below a certain age and the government recognizes that at this age they are forced to have extra childcare or they need childcare. There are subsidies that are given to parents of children of that age bracket. Another thing also could be around the government enforcing that companies within a certain revenue bracket make provisions for people that have children under a certain age level or age bracket. What that does is that as a woman, if you're going into work, you know that your child can come with you and have a place where they'll be taken care of until the child gets to that point where they can enter into school, such that you are still able to work. And your child is well taken care of and is close by enough for you to check in, and so your mind is in a good place. So those are the kind of policies that the government can take on to help the burden.
Right, subsidy definitely would be needed right there. But talking about in economics, we talk about scale of preference. When you're trying to manage resources and all of that. But coming to the whole price and demand destruction, we've seen prices of a lot of things go up a lot. And at the same time, as a parent, you're trying to balance, sending your child to a good school where they can get the best education, Talk to me about how parents can actually, balance this well so that the children don't suffer, even though you're trying to deal with a lot of other big expenses.
So what I generally tell parents is focus on your why for different stages. A child that is in elementary school, the major outcome from elementary school is knowledge of math and English, verbal reasoning. There are some basic things. Now, you might want your child to go to a certain school, which is more expensive than what you can afford. But if you can find another school that would offer that at that stage, then you might want to jump at that. Why? Because in the end, the financial pressure would hit you in another way, either in family pressure, either in tension in the home, or even in just the ability to eat in the end. Or you might be going to an expensive school and they say there's this thing that they want all the parents to pay for, and then your child is sad because you can't, there's nowhere to scrape from to pay for those things. Or then you go into debt. These are the things that happen. But if your child is in primary school and you can find a school that would guarantee the basics, the fact that your child would learn how to read, write, understand their mathematics and their verbal reasoning, and you can augment at home, go for it. By the time you get into secondary school and you're thinking about socials, you might say, okay, I need to reconsider the type of school. Then maybe if you've saved from primary school, you should or you could have money to afford something that would meet your needs on a bigger scale in secondary school. But the idea is look at what you are after, the most important thing that matters. And then the other things that you would like to do, make them secondary. And as long as you tick the right boxes within a budget that you can afford, then go for it.
All right, so talking about not able to afford some things as a parent for your kid, or some things that come up in school, and if do you think children are at risk of being bullied, by other children when their parents cannot afford certain something that the school actually, needs them to pay for? Do you think that kind of thing happens with most of these kids?
Well, I'm sure it happens, but I think that bullying is a bigger conversation than the parents just being able to afford things. You will find that in schools where the parents are not broke or anything, there's still bullying, right? So bullying is almost like a confidence slash system or school system around it or school structure around it type problem as against the parent being able to afford one thing or the other. Maybe teased, maybe the child can feel left out of social circles, things like that. But bullying in itself, I think it's more about systemic issues within a school system than just about the parent not being able to afford things.
Right, it's quite incredible. Sometimes you hear what some of these kids talk about. It's quite interesting. I've heard a lot of things, from some of these kids. But how do you think governments and businesses can collaborate to somehow support childcare?
I think the first thing is awareness. A lot of things go on as they do because people don't talk about it enough and people struggle in silence. So the first thing is awareness. This conversation we're having and highlighting the impact of the economy on families and on childcare is a good conversation to have. That's one. The second thing also is that the government needs to establish policies like the things that I have highlighted before that would actually help families because it's a major problem, right? It could actually help families. And then on the other hand, companies also have their role to play in terms of how do you create a good working environment for the women, especially to be able to take care of their families and not have to resign, because that's the major thing. Once a woman has to resign to sit down at home, it affects the woman's mentality or mental health. One, it also affects the family's financial situation, and then it affects the children. So if we are able to create that system where either you're a civil servant or a private sector worker or a business person, there is something within your area that you can fall back on. The fact is that Nigeria as a structure, as a system, a society has changed. There was a time when grandma would come and stay, right? Or one auntie, would host one auntie or cousin or younger person, and the child and that person would help you bring up your child or oversee them when you are at work. But those systems have changed, and we all know the nasty nanny stories that we get to hear intermittently. So it's a really tough situation. So if everyone takes up their own part, First, in speaking up. Second, in government policies. Third, in companies actually making provision for this and being aware of the need. I think we would see improvements over time.
It's quite interesting with the nanny situation. At this point, I see some families having to have like more than 10 nannies in 1 year because they keep going after a while. Um, let's look at, you see, UNICEF, they're estimating that quality early childhood services could raise, Nigeria's GDP by 1% through increased female employment alone. So how can policymakers prioritize, childcare investments? We know the government, they seem to be struggling with revenue, right now. So how do balance competing budget demands, as a government to make sure you're also prioritizing, childcare?
I think where this comes in is in public-private partnership, one, and also in grants and funding. You might not have the funding or the budget allocation to support subsidies for childcare, but you have a position where you can engage development finance institutions or development institutions and say that this is what we're trying to do to support women and children in this space, and this is how you can help us, right? And it could be something as simple as tax rebate for childcare companies, right? Or things like that that may not necessarily require the government coughing out cash, but making it more conducive for more people to go into childcare as a business, standardizing the industry as acknowledging that the industry exists and is needed and is a key part of the society and development. That's a major thing, actually. And once they do that, then, and women know for a fact that I can get a nanny that will be professional, I can pay her. I don't need the government to subsidize, but if I know someone that will give me peace, that in itself is a breather. So these are ways that it doesn't necessarily have to come in terms of cash payouts from the government, but there are things that can be put in place that would help the situation.
All right, definitely. Well, we're hoping everyone, gets happy at some point. The parents can get what they want, the kids can get what they want, government and everybody, private sector. Well, thank you so much. It was great having this conversation with you. Ola Oladele is the founder at the Money With Club. Thank you for coming on today.